Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has signed a formal agreement with Paris officials on issues related to hosting the next two Summer Olympics. The African-American mayor, along with other LA officials, arrived in Paris Thursday for a weekend of meetings. A statement from the mayor's office said the agreement is to formalize collaborating on our shared priorities. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
Is this the
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A special day Sunday for the USC women's basketball program. The Trojans won the Pac-12 tournament championship for the first time since 2014. They also found out they can win a title game when freshman sensation Juju Watkins has a bad day. The nation's second leading scorer had only 9 points Sunday against Stanford. USC still won. The Trojans beat Stanford by 13 in Vegas. Guard Mackenzie Forbes stepped up with a game-high 26. USC should get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. The brackets will be announced next Sunday. The Lakers beat Minnesota by 11. Anthony Davis is the first player in NBA history to finish with 27 points, 25 rebounds, 7 steals, 5 assists, and 3 block shots. The Clippers lost to Milwaukee. They played without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. George has a sore left knee. Kawhi is nursing a groin injury. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and I am delighted to have you tuned into our program today. Let me once again welcome some new stations that are carrying our program, and I am delighted and humbled, frankly, to have them carrying our program every day now. In Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, we are heard right now on WOL 1450 AM. One of my very first radio appearances 30 years ago. When I was just getting started, I was invited on WOL 1450 AM by Kathy Hughes, the founder of that station, and the sister with her son Alfred Liggins, who championed Radio One and TV One and all their companies. But Kathy Hughes, this single mom, got WOL 1450 AM off the ground there in D.C. many decades ago. And one of my very first interviews on radio was on her program. And I have never forgotten that moment. I always thank Miss Hughes every time I see her for putting me on WOL 1450 AM when I was just a kid on her program. And so I'm is honored to be in this full circle moment to have this program now heard weekdays on WOL 1450 AM in Washington, D.C. I also welcome listeners tuning in now in New York City on WHCR 90.3 FM, Harlem Community Radio. We thank New York City for carrying this program every day. And we are just delighted to be on WHCR 90.3 FM. And we are also pleased to be heard now in Des Moines, Iowa on KJMC 89.3. We welcome Washington and New York City and Des Moines to this program. And thank you once again for giving us a chance to be heard in those cities. In the weeks ahead, more stations to be announced. We are just grateful that this program in syndication is moving and grooving, and I couldn't be more thrilled at that. In this hour, a conversation about a new book called What We've Become. What We've Become. When a naked, mentally ill white man with an AR-15 killed 4 young adults of color at a Waffle House in Tennessee, Nashville-based physician and gun policy scholar Dr. Jonathan Metzl once again advocated for common sense gun reform. But as he started to peel back evidence surrounding this particular racially charged mass shooting, a shocking question emerged for him. Did the public health approach he had championed for all these years have it all wrong? Hence the book, What We've Become. Dr. Metzl, good to have you on this program, sir. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Really honored to be here.
I'm delighted to have you on. Let me start with this question. I tried to set up your mindset prior to this this mass shooting, and as you and I both know, these things, these mass shootings, that is, happen far too frequently. Every day, every other day, we get more news of mass shootings, and there are more mass shootings on this day than there are days in the year, and that seems to be the case in this country year after year. That said, take me back to your mindset prior to this mass shooting, and then we'll bring it forward.
Thanks so much. Well, I'm a doctor and I'm a sociologist, and I've had a very long career talking about gun violence, studying gun violence. And after the Waffle House mass shooting, I did the same thing I'd done after literally hundreds of mass shootings, which is I believe that gun violence was a public health epidemic, which is in part still what I believe. I believe that we needed background checks and red flag laws and other interventions, and we needed to take gun violence seriously as a public health emergency, the same way we did when we found out, for example, that cigarettes were killing people, or secondhand smoke, or that cars without good seatbelts or anti-lock brakes. So in a way, I'm coming out of the public health model. That's what I do. Mm-hmm. That's who I am. And even after this shooting, and a couple days after I was interviewed, I said the same thing I had said a million times before, which was we need to get serious about gun violence as a public health emergency. And so I was, I think, pretty uncritical about position before this book. But I'm also somebody who's studied a lot about race in America. And so I was, when there's a naked white man who's killing young adults of color, for me, that's kind of get my attention. And that's really where the book starts.
So it gets your attention and you start processing it differently. You start processing it how?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I found out something pretty remarkable, which is the jumping off point of the book. Which is that this was a clear case of murder. They've got the guy on tape. They show that he murdered 4 people and killed 4 others. When he was first convicted, he was convicted of 17 counts, 4 counts of each of the homicide counts, and 1 case which was a gun charge. Now, I knew from my research that this guy was very guilty of the gun charge because he'd been stopped by cops at least 5 other times. I had the police records. And in the months before the shooting, he'd gone to the White House and tried to jump the fence. He got arrested by the FBI. They took away his weapons. And so part of the story was, what does it mean to disarm a white man in the United States right now, a man who's very clearly intent on violence? But the other issue for me, and really where the book jumps off, is when he went to trial, he was honestly guilty of sin, and it was very obvious. He got convicted of 16 counts, but the 17th count was dropped by the trial, and nobody seemed to remember. I'm like, wait, what about the gun charge? And that case just literally disappeared. And so he was clearly guilty of something that will always be a crime, murder. But somebody who had an FBI file and shouldn't have had a gun was not convicted of the gun crime. And so for me, that's a jumping off point of all the other times, you know, think of all the other white male shooters, Kyle Rittenhouse on down, who are maybe guilty of killing other people, maybe not, in our legal system. But what does it mean to not adjudicate the gun? And so for me, that's where I start.
It's the jumping off point for the book, and it's the jumping off point for this conversation when we come forward. We'll start with that. What does it mean? That's a powerful question. What does it mean in this moment in America to disarm a white man? And what does it mean that this particular white man, after all you just heard Dr. Metso lay out about his past, was convicted of 16 counts, but they dropped the gun charge? A lot to interrogate, a lot to talk about when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
LADWP is proud to partner with KBLA to share with you how to start the new year without bill worries. We're here to help if you're behind on your bill or need help staying current. Sign up anytime online for Level Pay to set predictable monthly payments throughout the year, including for past due amounts. You can also check out the special extended pay arrangements of up to 48 months to help pay down your bill. If you're a senior or income qualified, you may be eligible for Easy Save to receive discounts and also qualify for free and discounted energy and water saving devices. You can get up to $15,000 for past due water and or sewer bills and up to $3,000 for electric bills. But you gotta act fast. Funding is limited. You can reduce your past due bills and kick off the year right, because here at LADWP, we're here to help. Visit ladwp.com/cares today and find out more.
Are you ready to ignite your potential? Special Needs Network presents the CORE Workforce Development Grant, an opportunity designed just for you. You've been there for everyone else. Now it's time to be there for yourself. Whether you're a college student or a working professional, the CORE program is here to empower you on your journey. Get paid with free specialized diversity training, mentorship, and stipend to fuel your passion, power, and purpose in the behavioral health sciences. It's time to focus on your dreams while making a difference in your community. Don't wait. Visit snnla.org/core program to apply today. Be the spark that ignites connections. Your future is waiting. Again, that's snnla.org/core program.
Made fresh daily in the Mert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Dr. Jonathan Metso, author of the new book, What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. You've already said enough that I want to jump to right quick, Dr. Metso, as we move through this hour, and thank you for the hour, to talk about the new book. So, to your mind, let me just, again, follow you on the two things you've laid out that I find really fascinating. What does it mean to you, to your mind, what does it mean in this moment to disarm or even talk about disarming a white man in America?
Well, in the story I tell in the book, which is, I think, for me, a good way to jump into that question.
Sure.
There are a couple years of this guy, the shooter, Travis Ranking. He was arrested stopped by the cops in the CVS parking lot, and he's making all these threats. And, a couple years before the shooting, they say clearly in the police report, this guy has 4 semi-automatic weapons. And then a couple of months after that, he jumps naked into a crowded public pool. Then he gets out and shakes an AR-15 in somebody's face. And the police report again says he has 4 semi-automatic weapons. And there's a number of those kind of events, again, leading up to him getting arrested at the White House. And every time this happens, they either give him his guns back, the cops, or they give them back to his dad, which is what happens. Mm-hmm. And so part of the story is that in this rural conservative part of Illinois where he's coming from, and then in Nashville, which is where he moves, a white man with a gun is seen as a protector, someone whose rights are to be protected by law, by more, by the way we just see the world. And even someone who's clearly bent on violence is not guilty. He's seen as a protector, even in this totally extreme case, until the second he pulls the trigger. And part of the story I kind of imagine in the book for people who have read it, I imagine, what if there was a black Travis Ranking? Would we have 5 police reports? And I feel very confident there would be 1 police report for if this character was not that. So part of the story is about just, even in the most extreme case, a white man with a gun is seen as a patriot, and that's part about social convention. But then the other part of the book is the laws. Just honestly, I go into this in a lot of detail, but there's just nothing to do. People knew this guy was bad news, but because the laws had gotten so relaxed to the point where there was no, they couldn't even convict him of the 17th count ultimately, because there was no law on the books anymore for what he had done. In other words, if you are in a state with no background check, no red flag law, no any kind of permit, training, any kind of process, then there's nothing you can do to stop somebody. And so the other part of the story is the laws we put in place support the rights of even the worst cases, even the mass shooters. We can't do anything about it. And then we fall back on who for us looks like a criminal and who for us looks like a patriot. And this guy looked like a patriot.
Yeah. Let me just say right quick, for those who are listening and heard our first hour today, I hope and I wish that Coleman Hughes were still listening to this program. Coleman Hughes is a CNN analyst and author of a new book called The End of Race Politics. I just spent an hour prior to you, Dr. Metzel, in a spirited conversation with Mr. Hughes about his notion that there is a way to end race politics in this country. He has a more conservative view. My view is unapologetically progressive, and so we had a spirited dialogue about this. But this is another one of the exhibits that I would offer to Coleman, where he's still around, about why we can't ever rise to the level of the end of race politics, because it ain't black folk, as I said in the last hour, who are playing the race card. Here's evidence right now of a white male who, as Dr. Metzel has laid out brilliantly, had not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 police reports, 5 run-ins with the cops. And every time he has a run-in, they give him or his father his weapons back. 5 times, and you get your weapons back. And Dr. Metzel's right. There ain't nowhere in the world that a Negro, a black person, would have had 5 chances to keep getting your weapons back. When you've clearly shown that you have behavioral issues, but this white guy, looking like a patriot because he's white, gets his guns back every single time. My question now, Dr. Metzel, is who and what that reality is an indictment of? I don't want to cover the question much more than that. Take it where you want to take it. But who and what is that reality that you just put your finger on? Who and what is that an indictment of in this country?
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, and how ironic, right? How ironic that, that I would love to. We should all three of us get together and have this conversation. By the way, your prayer guy, sign me up for that.
Yeah.
But I'll say this: a couple things. First of all, I mean, he didn't just have a gun; he jumped naked into a public pool,
Yeah.
right? And so, for people who know like Heather McGee's work and other people, there's just a racial history in this country of like who can even go into a public pool. And I talk about that,
yeah.
that in a way he's jumping into space that has been profoundly segregated, or places have shut down their public pools. So you kind of can't escape the history of race, racial resentment, segregation, all these factors. They just kind of shape the structure of how we interpret the world. And I can tell you more broadly, there are plenty of examples, even in states like Texas, where everybody ostensibly can carry a gun and we love guns and stuff like that, where the same, a white man walks into Walmart and it's like, how can we help you find what you're looking for? And a black man walks into Walmart who's a legal gun owner and he's tackled or arrested or shot. And so there's just this sense, and that's not an accident. It's that we have 200 years of history in this country of who can carry a gun in public and what that means. And so guns for me, I mean, part of why I argue that public health is not totally successful here is that guns are not cigarettes. They're not cars. There's a 200-year history of race in America that really codes who's as I said before, who's a patriot and who's a criminal. And there's other great literature on this. I mean, there's a book I love called Good Guys with Guns by sociologist Angela Stroud. And she interviews all these quote unquote good guys with guns. And they're all white good guys, permit holders, et cetera. And she said, well, why do you carry a gun with you everywhere you go? And they say, well, we could pull up to a bodega and Mr. Baggy Pants gangbanger could come up to my window and he's going to pull on me. I'm going to pull on him. And she said, that's great. Has that ever happened? And 100% of them said, actually, I've never even been to a bodega. So there's this fantasy, of there's this fantasy, and it's called, it's kind of like anticipatory threat, that we imagine the threat as the group that we find the least trustworthy. And so, I don't know, for me, when you throw guns into the mix of, I mean, I've given you quite a long answer about the history of race and racial resentment in America, but to me, it's honestly, for me, a crazy problem to be throwing a lot of guns at, but that's what we're doing right now.
Now, the reason why I asked you that question in part about who you indict, given the narrative you laid out of this white male having 5 police reports, and every time he gets caught up in something, they give him his guns back. He's jumping in a public pool naked. He still gets his gun back. Clearly, he's got mental issues. He gets his guns back every single time. The reason why I asked you the question about who you want to indict here is because you made it clear that when these 17 charges were finally brought against him after he kills these 4 people of color at a Waffle House in Tennessee, when they finally bring these charges against him, he's found guilty of 16. But the 17th charge is dropped. It just so happens that 17th charge is the gun charge. So I ask again, who you want to indict when that gun charge gets dropped?
Well, I think we need gun laws. I mean, I certainly think that we need them. But I'll just say, for people who get a chance to read the book, there are plenty of really hardworking people trying to bring total justice in this case. I mean, it's actually quite remarkable, some of the stories. But I mean, I think the fact that we've gotten gun laws dropped, I mean, let's be honest here. We're talking about like the GOP and the NRA and all those guys, who have dropped gun laws to the point where it's not just what's called constitutional carry, which is to me not anything I see in the Constitution. This idea that anybody can carry a gun without any training, but it's also like it's really clear who suffers by those systems, who gains and who suffers. And so if you want trace it back to the origin, I would definitely say the GOP has absolutely sold its soul here. I have no problem saying that. But I also think that the minute guns get circulating, it creates a kind of paranoia where if your neighbor has a gun, you need a gun also. So it becomes an America problem. It becomes an America problem.
You are not the first person I've spoken to. This won't surprise you, Dr. Metzel. You're not the first person I've spoken to in my decades-long career now who has suggested to me that the gun problem in America is, in fact, a public health epidemic. You're not the first one to suggest that, which leads me to ask how things might be different. Just imagine for me, because I'm not sure I'm going to take the bait, but give it to me anyway. How might things be different if we really could accept the fact, if there really were a serious declaration followed with some teeth? How might this conversation, how might the reality be different if we ever were to truly embrace the notion that guns in our society are a public health epidemic? Because I hear your point that you sort of changed your thinking. I'm working my way toward that. After this shooting, you changed your thinking a bit. You do acknowledge that it's still a public health epidemic. But my question is, if we truly ever embrace that formulation, that it is in fact a public health epidemic, how might the gun issue in America be different? Does that make sense?
It totally does. And just to be clear, I'm arguing against my former position in this book. And so I say I agree. I mean, certainly we have 50,000 gun deaths a year or more in this country. Everyone should be preventable. And so I do think that the methods of public health are valid. And I think that there are, just look at many other countries where people have guns around but don't have anywhere near the level of injury or death that we do. And so I wish we lived in a world where the methods of public health could do for guns the same thing we've done for cigarettes or cars, which is not take them away from people, but make them an awful lot safer. And, everything from the stuff you hear about, background checks, red flag laws, to technology, smart gun technology that only fires in its owner's hand, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of things we could do. And also, I'm going to argue both sides of this.
Sure.
Guns are a public health problem because most gun death is gun suicide. And that's pretty patterned also. I mean, that was what my last book was about. Mm-hmm. So I certainly am not arguing. I'm a doctor and I'm not arguing against my own position. But the flip of it for me is, I tell a story in this book of a guy who he was many things before he became a killer. And the fact that he coded as, the fact that he could carry a gun around and couldn't be stopped legally, that's not a public health problem for me. That's a race problem. Mm-hmm. That's a legal problem. That's a judiciary problem. And so there are all these ways that I go back and forth in the book even and say, yes, guns are a public health problem, but there are all these reasons we have to think why they're also not a public health problem. And for me, those are really important to think about also.
Yep. Tell me more about how the racial element to this particular mass murder in Tennessee impacted your thinking.
Well, one I already suggested, which was I started off thinking this was like the Buffalo shooter, for example, for people who remember that, a clear racist with a manifesto
at the grocery store.
Yeah. And there were early reports in this case, even false news reports spread by Sean King and other people that were saying this guy had racist epithets before and blah, blah, blah. It turned out none of that was true. And I listened to, for me, it's the most jarring part of the book. I listened to hundreds of hours of his home videos, his testimony, and, take this as you will. He doesn't say one racist thing in any, even of the private videos or anything. So it was pretty clear that this wasn't like a Buffalo kind of case. Mm-hmm. But for me, the bigger race story was we had a choice in Tennessee. This guy came to Tennessee in large part because he could carry his guns here, and nobody could stop him because our laws were so bad.
Sure.
And so we had a choice after this shooting, which is here is clearly a manifestation of a much bigger problem, which, as I write in the book, is basically white guns end up killing Black Americans. Mm-hmm. And so we had a choice. We could either learn from this case and change the gun laws to say, look, we learned our lesson here and we don't ever want this to happen to any families again. Or we could say, we're learning our lesson and we're going to dramatically expand the rights of people like the mass shooter. And we did the latter. And so for me, the more terrifying case, honestly, if it's one racist guy, I can deal with that. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But if the whole state is changing their laws to broaden the liberties of the guy who is a mass shooter and more people like him, to me, that's scarier because that's where it becomes structural.
And that's where I want to go when we come forward. This notion that white guns kill Black Americans, that is true. White guns kill Black Americans. And if you're in that frame, it's hard to imagine, you take my point, why we would ever get serious about the gun problem in America. You feel me? So long as white guns kill Black Americans, this is the nation we've become. But why do we think we're going to be anything different? More of Tavis Smiley and Jonathan Metzel when we come forward.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like
Hey y'all, Mona Swain here from Target's new YouTube series, My Cart is Full, where we feature Black founders and creators highlighting their connection to our community. As an actor and content creator, I love using my voice to inspire young Black women who look like me. When it comes to feeding my shine, seeing myself reflected in Black-owned and founded products at Target brings me joy. Together, we are Black Beyond Measure. Learn more at target.com/Black Beyond Measure.
Cookie wants to be a professional wrestler.
I'm Cookie Serratos and I'm 11 years old.
She also wants to win all the medals. That's why Cookie and her family make every day count, squeezing out her best with Go-Go Squeeze.
Okay, Cookie, let's break for a Go-Go Squeeze.
Go-Go Squeeze Fruit on the Go pouches are a nutritious snack made from 100% fruit with no sugar added.
Go, Cookie!
Because when you nurture your kids, you squeeze out the best in them. Squeeze out the best with Go-Go Squeeze. Not a low-calorie food. Products range from 11 to 13 grams of sugar and 60 to 70 calories per serving.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The trial of a Michigan father charged in connection with a deadly school shooting carried out today by his teenage son continues today. James Crumbley is charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the deaths of 4 children at Oxford High School in 2021 who were killed by his son. Jennifer Crumbley has already been found guilty on the same charges. The U.S. Embassy is evacuating non-essential staff members from Haiti as gang violence rips the Caribbean nation. The U.S. Southern Command says American military forces are assisting the operation and helping provide security at the request of the State Department. A post on the embassy's website is describing the situation as unpredictable and dangerous. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A special day Sunday for the USC women's basketball program. The Trojans won the Pac-12 tournament championship for the first time since 2014. They also found out they can win a title game when freshman sensation Juju Watkins has a bad day. The nation's second leading scorer had only 9 points Sunday against Stanford. USC still won. The Trojans beat Stanford by 13 in Vegas. Guard Mackenzie Forbes stepped up with a game-high 26. USC should get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. The brackets will be announced next Sunday. The Lakers beat Minnesota by 11. Anthony Davis is the first player in NBA history to finish with 27 points, 25 rebounds, 7 steals, 5 assists, and 3 block shots. The Clippers lost to Milwaukee. They played without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. George has a sore left knee. Kawhi is nursing a groin injury. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Do you support public education? More than 38,000 educators at United Teachers Los Angeles do too. Together, we have fought for a better public education for our students and communities, and having you on our side has been essential in our fight for better public schools. Together, we will continue to work for public schools with green spaces, more mental health staff, smaller class sizes at every grade level, and a higher investment in the Black Student Achievement Plan. We are UTLA, and you make us stronger.
If you're looking for the most epic place on Earth, let's start at the base of a massive waterfall. Then trek through the thick jungle. Then climb to the peak of a snowy mountaintop. Then once you get there, keep going. Because with intelligent 4x4 and 7 drive modes and a Nissan Pathfinder, the search is the real adventure.
Available feature. Intelligent 4x4 cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions.
Psst. Hey, I have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? You know, my...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Dr. Jonathan M. Metzl, who's author of the new book, What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. You made a powerful point before we stepped aside. And what you said was that white guns kill Black Americans. White guns kill Black Americans. I thought of my friend Jesse Jackson earlier today on this program. I welcomed, as I will next hour, welcome some new stations into the fold in New York, in D.C., in Des Moines. We've long been heard in Chicago, the hometown of Jesse Jackson on WVON. And Jesse has said, Reverend Jackson said for many, many years that Black folk don't own no gun we're not gun manufacturers. We ain't got no planes. We are not in the business of manufacturing these weapons or shipping them across the country. That's not what we do. And at the end of the day, the reality is that too often these white guns end up killing Black Americans. But so long as that is the frame that we are in, so long as that is the reality, I don't know that I should hold my breath or hold out hope that we will ever get our arms around the gun problem in America, because that factoid suggests to me that we don't want to get wrap our arms around the gun problem. Let me put it another way. When they killed those babies, Dr. Metzl, in Sandy Hook, you recall that, of course, yes?
Oh, yeah.
When they killed those babies in Sandy Hook, that for me was the end-all be-all. I knew then that America was not really serious about gun violence. Because when you can kill precious white babies, not Black babies, not brown babies, when you can kill precious white babies, and the country ultimately still looks the other way, I knew then that I might as well, I should really stop wasting my time talking about the gun issue in America. Obviously, I've not done that as evidence of your being on this program, because it's one thing to think that, it's another thing for me to confront myself about why I need to talk about this as often as I should and can. And so, again, I'm glad to have you on this program. But something in that moment, just jumped out at me. If they're not going to get serious about this when they're killing their white babies, then the fact that white guns kill black Americans clearly is not a good enough reason for us to take this issue seriously. I digress. Your thoughts?
Well, no, it is a digression, the whole thing, honestly. I mean, I take a lot of these narratives to heart in the book. One is the narrative that guns equal equality, and we know this, going back to Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X and Huey Newton, the idea that basically if we can carry guns just like it'll bring us equality. And it is definitely true right now that pretty much anybody can buy a gun. But I guess one of the questions I ask in the book is, does that bring equality? And it is true. Black gun owners, for example, are among the fastest growing group of gun owners in the country right now.
Yes.
Black women in particular. But did it bring equality, and how did it not bring equality? And so I talk a lot about how the NRA are arms dealers. They are not. They want to sell guns. And so what I show in the book is that even in cases like the Waffle House shooting, where the Waffle House is a gun-free zone, you can't bring a gun into a Waffle House restaurant. And so after the shooting, all these people were like, well, we should have had our guns, which is true. Like, I wish people would have been armed in that restaurant, because maybe they would have been able to stop the carnage sooner. But at a larger level, what I show is that after a lot of tragedies, like after the murder of George Floyd, for example, there was a very targeted effort to sell guns to Black and brown Americans, saying the police aren't going to protect you and you don't want to be like George Floyd and this is your chance. It was a really conscious campaign, which I have the information in the book. And then they turn around to white gun owners and they're like, look, all these Black people have guns, so you should buy more. You should buy more guns. And so part of the story here is that it's never going to be equality, right? Black gun owners, if you want to get the people I interview in the book, I interview a lot of gun owners in the book, a lot of people I know. They have 30 guns, and what would get them to buy more guns? Well, having a lot of Black people with guns is a great way to then get them to buy more guns. And so, in a way, we're in an arms race in our country. It's not just about like the Second Amendment or liberty or anything, which I'm my dad was in the Air Force. I'm from Missouri. I've grown up around guns a lot, but we're in an inter-country arms race right now, which is not, I think, the intention of any of that.
To your point about this arms race, and you're invoking Stokely and Huey and the Black Panthers and others who have argued for quite some time that guns bring about equality. I take your argument. I'm not so sure that guns do in fact bring about equality, but I guess my question is, if not equality, does everybody being armed ultimately equal mutual deterrence?
Definitely not. I mean, look at the data in my last two books. The biggest risk of gun injury and death is having a gun in your house. So, we argue understandably about mass shootings, which are horrible and horrific. They kill 500 people a year, maybe 600. Every death is a death too many. But we have 50,000 gun deaths a year in this country, and 2/3 are gun suicide, and a huge number are partner shootings, and a huge number are, a bunch of other different kinds of shootings, homicide, obviously. And so, in a way, what I argue in the book is that guns by themselves are no deterrence for anything. In fact, if you invite a lot of guns into your community, you're inviting the same risk as you do if you walk into a restaurant and people are smoking and you inhale the secondhand smoke. It's a health hazard. But I also argue that if we don't also fix infrastructure, that gun data shows us really that we haven't invested enough in safe communities and streetlights and parks and green space, that in a way this problem is never going to fix itself if we don't also invest in infrastructure that makes people feel safe in their communities. And so I end up I end up being a structuralist by the end of the book.
Yep. If one listens to you long enough and one reads your book, one could come away with the impression that we have normalized violence in this country as an acceptable trade-off for freedom. I'm putting freedom in air quotes. It's radio. You can't see me. But that we've normalized violence as an acceptable trade-off for freedom. Interrogate yourself that argument for me.
Well, that's why I call the book What We've Become.
Yeah.
Part of the story is we've become a society that has habituated or normalized mass casualties.
Yeah.
and who habituates casualties like that? It's soldiers in wartime.
Yeah.
If you look at the original studies, for example, of post-traumatic stress disorder, they basically said your risk of, if you're in a military conflict for 10 hours, you have a 10% chance of getting PTSD. If you're in a fight for 50 hours, you have 50% chance. The idea was like, the more you thought you could die, the more chance you would get of getting PTSD. Well, we have people who are afraid to die 100% of the time because that's the world we live in. And so part of the story is, what happens to the soul of our nation.
Yep.
And it's a level of habituation. Those early mass shootings that you talked about, at least we had a national reckoning. At least we had 6 months. I mean, even after Parkland, Donald Trump walked back to his positions and Marco Rubio walked back his positions. And there was tremendous energy. And now, the last point is that right now people feel like there's nothing they can do. There's a learned helplessness about it now.
Speaking of Trump and Rubio and others, when we come forward, I want to ask you, you acknowledge, you're very transparent in the book as a physician. You acknowledge what you've missed in your own thinking about this gun epidemic in America. And now you're rethinking certain parts, and that's what the book is about. I want to ask you what you think policymakers are missing about the gun epidemic in America. His name is Jonathan Metzl. His book is What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. More of him on Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
From Lamert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
So you just used bug spray in your home. Now what? Well, between the waiting and waiting for things to dry up and keeping your family away from the mess, it hits you. You could have used Zevo. Unlike other bug sprays that stick around, Zevo goes from kill to clean in seconds. Plus, it's safe for use around people and pets when used as directed. Zevo, people-friendly, bug-deadly.
Hey, what are you doing up on the step stool?
About to clean these light fixtures. The whole family's coming over, and if there's even a speck of dust in the house, my abuela will find it.
Here, I got a Swiffer duster to help with that.
A Swiffer what?
A Swiffer duster. It has this cool extendable handle that reaches 6 feet to get high and low, with fluffy dusters that easily trap and lock dust.
So, no more step stool?
No more step stool.
Easily trap and lock dust from hard-to-reach places with the Swiffer duster. Love it or your money back.
Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. Sometimes we try to fit it all in. Sometimes we don't know what's in store. Sometimes we find what we're looking for. Sometimes we're rolling easy and free. Sometimes 1 and 1 makes 3. So much to love along this ride. That's why Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and Affiliates, Columbus, Ohio.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
Dr. Metzel, you've been quite transparent in this book, What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms, about the way that you have viewed heretofore or previously this gun epidemic and the way you see it differently now after this racially motivated or certainly racist mass shooting in Tennessee that we all recall at the Waffle House there some years ago. But what is it you think that policymakers are missing in this conversation, in this dilemma, in this gun epidemic in America?
Yeah, so thank you. I so appreciate that question. And part of the book is reflecting on, taking myself to task in this book. Like, what would I do? I would say that there are two main things I talk about in the book. Mm-hmm. One, I talk a lot about how my side, we are great at changing popular opinion. 85% of people support background checks, et cetera. That's important. But the other side has been, they're not thinking about guns as health risks like cigarettes or asbestos or something. They see them as power. And so for them, for power, their whole strategy has been to control the courts and control the Supreme Court in particular. And so partially, I really show, I think, hopefully clearly or debatably, that we haven't paid enough attention to the political problem of guns. We haven't done enough to pay attention to the judiciary problem of guns. A health frame just honestly doesn't help you do that. Yeah. And we should have been much more transparent about what it meant to be a good judge from our perspective, because the reason we're in this boat right now is in part because of all the NRA judges on the Supreme Court and et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the issues is we just needed a much more clear political agenda that was in part about health, but it was also about judges. And then there's another one that is a bit less obvious, which is just the racial implications of what we were proposing. We do a lot of interventions that require trust in government or authorities. For example, a background check. When you buy a gun, you're putting your name in a federal database, and who's going to ping on that database? Well, it's people who have a prior history of arrest or incarceration. And so who's going to ping more on that database? A red flag law, you're inviting police into your home effectively to do a welfare check on your relative. And so who's going to be a bit more wary of inviting cops into their house? And so in a way, I think a lot of what we did was pushed communities of color into what are wrongly called illegal markets by the interventions we were doing. And I think that hurt us ultimately because we need a broad coalition. It's not surprising to me that communities of color are moving toward gun ownership right now. And in part, that's because of the world, but it's also because, for me, gun safety was too reliant on having to go along with things that were, I think, in some ways, though well-intentioned, targeting Black Americans.
No, it's a powerful, powerful point. Wish I had more time to interrogate that when we come forward in our remaining moments with Dr. Jonathan Metzel, author of the book, What We Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. I think my exit question is going to be, what does what we have become say about the soul of our nation? That was his phrase earlier. The soul of our nation. What does what we've become then say about the soul of our nation? That's the exit question for Dr. Jonathan Metzel when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know? The United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time. Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
I'm going out with the girls this weekend. Nails done, outfit stunner, and my skin, I know it's going to be glowing because I glammed up my shower routine with new Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash. It smells so luxurious and moisturizes deep into my skin with its super rich, creamy lather that's bursting with vitamin B3. So my skin glows and my confidence grows. Try new Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash for glowing skin in just 14 days. You can do it all by yourself, baby girl. What's your name? Let me talk to you. Let me buy you a drink.
Spilled your drink? Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up spills quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less than the leading ordinary brand. So you can get back to your night. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
My mom has taken up going to the park to practice yoga.
My dad's going to a club, but not a book club, a salsa club.
Finding new hobbies comes with age.
My mom has started getting lost and not knowing where she's going.
Becoming lost or disoriented doesn't. Confusion with time or place may be a sign of Alzheimer's. An early diagnosis can help improve the quality of life for your loved one. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right. Yeah. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of consistency, all over Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face when it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah. Breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Dr. Metzel, what does what we've become, living and dying in a country of arms, say about the soul of our nation?
Now, countries that have figured this out, it's not like there's any one policy that's going to get us out of this crazy, horrible problem. Countries that have figured this out, people agreed to sit down at the table and work out their differences. There was a political structure in Australia, in Scotland, and other places. There's no one policy. So gun violence is a reflection of our broken political system. We need to figure out a way that people can come together and reasonably debate this, which bigger issues about, gerrymandering and all these other factors. But until we have a political structure that can support that conversation, I fear. And the other part is elections have profound implications. And so Trump put 3 NRA judges on the Supreme Court, and we would be seeing a lot more of that. And so we're also seeing, the election is really going to have a profound implication for our ability to even have those conversations.
To your point, until we have a political structure that can wrestle with this kind of conversation, until I don't see that in the near future. So my question is, how does one who does what you do every day, how does one who writes a book like this sustain his hope?
I hope people get to read the book and hear the voices of the families in the book. They suffered an unimaginable loss. And the mom of one of the mass shooters, Shondell Brooks, in my case, is now running for state office in Tennessee. And so the bravery of people who keep getting up are much braver than I am. And I just want to do those voices justice, because I think in a way that's what they deserve, but they give me hope that we can fight through this.
Jonathan Metzl has been our guest in this hour, and I'm delighted in having him on. His new book is called What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. His previous New York Times bestseller was called is called Dying of Whiteness, How the Politics of Racial Resentment is Killing America's Heartland. In that book, he looks at why so many working class white Americans support politicians like Donald Trump, whose policies are literally killing them. That book was the winner of the 2020 Robert F. Kennedy Book Award, and I expect great things for this book as well. Once again, his latest book, which we've discussed in this hour, is called What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. Dr. Metzl, thank you, sir, sincerely for your work and for your witness. Thank you for this conversation. An honor to have you on. All the best to you, sir.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it myself. Thank you. When we come forward in our final hour today, we'll commence hour 3 in conversation with the man who pulled off that major deal for the UAW last year, UAW head Shawn Fain on Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network.